I'm Steve Gillman, and this is Brand Story, where we help you build stronger, more sustainable brands by sharing insightful conversations with brand leaders, marketers, and professional storytellers. And my guest today is Terry Szuplat.
I always ask people, think of some of your most deeply held beliefs. Think of why you've joined a particular company or signed up for the military or why you donate or why you volunteer. It's because they've told you a story, a compelling, powerful, emotional story. I think being a great leader, being a great communicator, you have to be a great storyteller. And I try to lay out ways to do that in the book.
Welcome to Brand Story. I'm your host, Steve Gillman, and today is our first episode of Season 5. And to kick off Season 5, I'm excited to welcome back Terry Szuplat, one of President Obama's longest-serving speechwriters, and now the author of Say It Well. Find your voice, speak your mind, and inspire any audience. During his 8 years at the White House, Terry helped craft countless speeches for President Obama, and since then has been helping leaders across the country and in multiple industries communicate clearly. And now with his book, Say It Well, he's distilled what he's learned into a practical guide for anyone who wants to communicate better. Hi, Terry. Welcome back to Brand Story.
Thanks for having me back, Steve. Appreciate it. Excited.
I'm so glad you're back. And we were talking before we got started here. I don't know if you remember at the end of your last episode, we were talking briefly about you starting to think about writing a book. And I said, if you do it, come on back and look, you have a book that's winning awards.
I had a crazy idea. I foolishly followed it, but we can talk about. Everyone always says, you should write a book, or maybe I should write a book, and it's been quite a journey.
I bet it's a ton of work. I can't even imagine. We'll get into that a little bit. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, just to jump off, is your book just won Best Marketing Communications Book of 2024 from Porchlight Book Company. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, I did. One of the reasons I wrote it was to help, anyone be a better communicator, but especially in business and in industry. So it's a great honor.
Yeah, we're in marketing and advertising, and we help people grow their brands. So I got to tell you, if you're out there and you're a marketer, get this book. This book is amazing. It's probably one of the best books on communication and storytelling and how to reach an audience that I've read. So bravo, man.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
thank you.
It's very, very good. So let's talk a little bit about the book. In the last episode, we dug into all your time in the White House and traveling to over 30 countries and the challenges of being a speechwriter. So I'm going to link to your first episode in your new episode page so people can go back, because this is a fascinating conversation. But today I mostly wanted to focus on this book because I really want everyone to read it that's in marketing, because I think it would help anyone out there that's listening. So every book has an origin story. And so for Say It Well, was there a moment that you said, okay, I really have to write this book and this is what I want it to say?
It sort of evolved in an odd way. I had explained in the book, I had spent almost 25, 30 years behind the scenes writing speeches and presentations for other people in their voice and working hard to mimic their approach, how they think, how they talk. When I left the White House, I suddenly found myself in the situation of getting invited to do interviews and on television and speak to groups. And sometimes it went well. Most of the time it did not go so well. And I talk about some of those moments in the book where I struggled as a public speaker. And I think I had spent so much time, my entire adult life, really professionally, helping other people find their voice that in a way I had lost my own. I didn't know sort of what I believed or what I could contribute or where I fit in or how I could contribute to the conversation. And so I started to pull back and turn down invitations and did that for a while. And then COVID came and there weren't many invitations for anybody to speak in person. So it was kind of a blessing in disguise for me in that way. I then got an invite to, someone called me up and said, we'd like you to speak to 300 people to keynote address. Oh, by the way, no podium. So just you on a stage. This is my nightmare. I think for a lot of your listeners too, this is an absolute nightmare. And I almost said no. But I sort of got to think about it. I was talking about it with my wife, and I realized clearly I'm kind of hiding from something that scares me, that's difficult, which is what a lot of us do. We avoid the things that are hard. I was in my late 40s, and I sort of got to thinking, am I going to sort of just keep hiding from this thing for the rest of my life? So the good thing was this speech wasn't in a week or a month. It was 6 months away. I had 6 months to prepare and to think about how I might do it. And so I said, what the heck? Why not? I'm going to try this. And I had 6 months to get ready. And in that time, basically, I sort of sat down and very deliberately tried to dissect and reverse engineer all the things that I had learned from working with the president, in this case, Barack Obama at the White House, and how I could do it for myself. And those lessons, the things I had to relearn myself to become a better speaker, became the book. I realized through that process, hey, I think there could be a book here.
That's one of the things I love about the book is that so many people are just petrified about public speaking. I think like, if you give someone the option of diving off a cliff or doing public speaking, a lot of people might take the cliff.
Or choose the cliff.
Yeah. So I really respect that you forced yourself to like try to get comfortable with that and face your fears. And I love that you build that throughout the book because I feel like a lot of business books or a lot of books on how to do something as challenging as public speaking don't come across very personal. And I think you did a really nice job of letting us know that you're not just some expert that can tell us how to do this. You've actually had to live this and learn how to do it and help conquer your own fears.
Yeah, no, and I try to bring through the book the reader on that journey with me. That here are the lessons I learned, and I share them throughout the book, and then it culminates with me trying to give that first real big speech of my adult life and how it went and what I learned from that experience. And so, and again, public speaking communications, it's a skill like any skill. It can be learned. It's a big theme of the book. One of the phrases that really sets me off is when I hear someone say, well, so and so is a naturally gifted speaker, or Barack Obama is a naturally gifted speaker. I don't think anyone's naturally gifted at anything, right? Like when you see someone, an athlete, a musician, a performer, a speaker, and they're very good, what you're seeing is the result of years, perhaps decades of hard work. You're seeing the finished product. You're not seeing them in their early mistakes, the mistakes and missteps they made. And so, we tend to look at all these, experts in their field and think, well, I can't do that. Well, I tell the story in the book of how Barack Obama at times struggled as a public speaker when he was a young man, and I really think it's really important for everybody, especially young people, to know that even someone like him had to go through the process of learning to get better and working at it. And I tell that story in the book as well, how he became a very one of the greatest speakers of our time. It didn't happen overnight, and it's not going to happen overnight for any of us.
Yeah, and I've heard that a lot where people just like, almost dismiss like, well, he's a gifted speaker. And that's what I loved about this book is that I had no idea. I never imagined Barack Obama having a difficult time like becoming a speaker, but of course he did.
He's a human being.
He's a human being. Yeah. And if you're going to be great at something, you put in a lot of practice and hard work to get there. You have a something that you talk about in the book that I just love, and it's speaking as yourself, not a version of yourself, and using yourself and your own story and what you have experienced and feel deeply authentically. And I think that really worked for Barack Obama. And I love how you weave that throughout the book. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so when I work with clients in business, nonprofits, whatever, one of the first questions I often get is, well, what should I talk about? I don't know what to say. And for a lot of us who work in this field, one of the first things we say back, and it's not meant to be flippant, is, well, you should say what only you could say. When you are invited to speak somewhere, or when you have an opportunity to speak, when you are on a panel, your audience doesn't want to hear what they've heard 100 times from 100 other people. They want to hear something unique, fresh, different from you. And now that terrifies a lot of people because they think, well, what can I possibly say? Well, what I try to convey in the book is that, we're 1 in 8 billion. There's nobody else on the planet who has had our life journey, our life experiences, the stories. So great speakers, great communicators personalize their remarks. They say what only they can say. They tell the stories that only they can tell. And so one of the first steps when I work with someone is to sit down with them and do a really deep dive to get to know them and their stories and their history and their life. You think of the great commencement speakers that you've heard. They're always there. They're sharing unique things about their life that no one else can can share. And so that's a process that we work through with President Obama. It's a process I've worked through with every client I've ever worked with. Uh, you know, in the early part of the book, I actually list out sort of 10 questions that I encourage everybody to think about before you ever get up in front of an audience. Because, if you're going to ask them to believe in you and believe in your product, your company, your organization, you have to believe in yourself too. You have to know what you stand for, what your values are, what you're working towards, what your vision is, what's important to you, your fears, your disappointments, your hopes. I mean, these are big questions. I was going through these once with a client, very successful investor who had to give a commencement address, and this person put up their hand and said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! This this feels like a therapy session. It's not what I signed up for." And I was thrilled. I was like, "It's exactly what it should feel like." Because again, when you get up in front of a group of people and ask them to share your perspective on the world, to embrace your product, embrace your worldview, embrace your way of doing business, you need to be really sure who you are and what you believe. And I think we've all been in the audience, particularly with political leaders sometimes, where I think they're just telling me what I want to hear. They're actually not telling because they don't, they'll say one thing to one audience on Monday and something different to a different audience on Tuesday. Well, that's clearly someone who doesn't know what they believe. They're just trying to, pander to whatever audience they're in front of. So it's a really important step. I've had a lot of people tell me, wow, that first chapter of the book feels like some really deep therapy. It feels like more of a psychology book. And that's exactly what I want it to be, because again, I've worked with people, and the best speakers, the best communicators are folks that are willing to bring their whole self to the presentation. And I know in business, that can be a real challenge. A lot of CEOs, a lot of executives just, oh, well, I just want to talk about the product, the service, the company. Well, you should do all that. But, the great business leaders also bring their own story and why they care and why they do this work. So it's a huge part of being an effective communicator.
It is. And I think audiences, big and small, can just smell inauthenticity. Like when you're not authentic, people sense it, and that's when they tune out.
It's a kiss of death.
It is. So incorporating your own personal story into a speech or a keynote or any kind of public interaction with the audience, I think makes a ton of sense. And the 10 questions that you ask, we won't go through them right now because anyone listening, those 10 questions are worth the entire book. I got to those 10 questions. I was like, man, this is a meaty chapter. The beginning of that book is like those 10 questions alone.
Right, that's the first one.
Yeah, it's the first one. I was like, those 10 questions alone are so helpful.
I've had some readers reach out to me and say that they put the book, they set aside some time on a Saturday and just sat down and really did some deep thinking. And I think whether you plan to give a speech or not, I think these are some really important questions that we should all be asking about the work we do, why we're in it. Because again, this is what our audiences want to know. This is what's going to help you connect with an audience and inspire and motivate them.
Absolutely. And it reminds me a lot about the work that I end up doing with brands, because getting a brand to speak about itself and what the value it adds authentically, almost personally. Like most brands have started because someone's passionate about something or wants to change something. And then it becomes like corporate speak that no one cares about. So getting back to like being human,
creating synergies.
Yeah, creating synergies for all across all of our properties. It's like, who cares? So yeah, I think that speaking as yourself, not a version of yourself, is so important. And I think it's probably hard for people to be confident to go speak, whether they're introverted or whatever. But I really feel like that first chapter, if you're going to go give any kind of presentation, that first chapter will set you up for success.
I think so. I did that on purpose because so many books about communications and public speaking and leadership, tend to get really nitty gritty very quickly. How to structure the presentation, how to open, how to close, and I cover all that in the book. But none of that's going to matter if you, on a fundamental level, don't believe in yourself, believe in what you have to offer, believe that you deserve to be there on that stage at that podium. Because so many people just self-censor. They just think, well, I don't have, who wants to hear from me? I don't have anything unique to say. What can I possibly add to this discussion? So they never they never accept the invitation. They never seek out the opportunity to speak. So that's why I put that at the beginning, because if you can get over that hump, which I think was my big hump, and in terms of the roots of my own anxieties around this, everything else can fall into place. You can learn how to open and close a speech pretty easily. That's not rocket science.
Right. Yeah, but the mechanics are the mechanics, and speaking from the heart is something else.
But if you think you can't do it in the first place, then it doesn't matter. No, there's no mechanic that's going to help you.
Yeah, you're done before you even start. And I think, something that we talk about a lot is everyone buys everything emotionally. We are very highly emotional beings. And we all think we're more like, Spocks, but we're actually Captain Kirks.
Yeah, right. The other person's emotional and instinctive. We're fact based, and we make our decisions based on information. Yet every study tells you the opposite.
Yeah, and then when you go hear a speaker, whether it's a business presentation, whether it's a leader having to talk to their employees, whatever it is, the one that has genuine emotion, the one that's sharing whatever information with some genuine emotion and perspective is the one you're going to remember. The one that's a bunch of facts or features or benefits is going to go in one ear and right out the other.
Yeah, no, I talk about that a lot in the book. I mean, again, this has been shown by study after study. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that so many leaders make, both in politics and business and NGOs and philanthropy, is, we overwhelm our audiences with just too much data. We think that, oh, if I just give them one more statistic, one more number, they'll they'll see it our way, and they'll donate all their money to me, or they'll come work for me. And that's just not the case. And I always ask people, think of think of some of your most deeply held beliefs. Think of why you've joined a particular company, or signed up for the military, or why you donate, or why you volunteer. It's almost never because someone has thrown a lot of numbers at you. It's because or statistic. It's because they've told you a story, a compelling, powerful, emotional story about the difference you can make, about the people you can help, about the lives you can save, that you can touch. That's why people work insane hours. That's why they will do everything they can to help in a crisis. So I think being a great leader, being a great communicator, you have to be a great storyteller, and I try to lay out ways to do that in the book.
Yeah, and I think that's so key to great leaders, your book is rich with this. When you pack a presentation or you try to persuade by just fact after fact and statistic after statistic, you're really just trying to like persuade at someone. You're not pulling them into a story. You're literally just beating them over the head with facts that they'll instantly forget. So one of the examples you use that I think is so cool is someone named Donovan Livingston, who was just giving a graduation speech, and it went viral, and I went and looked at it. And it's such a cool example because it really is about being authentic and using your authentic voice. Can you tell the audience just a little bit about that example?
Sure. He's an incredible person. Donovan Livingston was a graduate student invited to speak at his graduation ceremony. He also happens to be he was a graduate school of education. He also happens to be a hip hop artist. So he did something, he did what only he could do. He turned his speech into a hip hop performance. And the reason I share it, I mean, it's phenomenal. Like, I'm so glad you looked at it. One of the things that I hope people do as they read the book is put the book down, jump online, and just watch all these speeches that I talked about. So many of them are not just from the president, but from just folks, amazing speeches from folks all across the country that have gone viral. And that tells you something, right? When something goes viral, it's clearly resonated with, in this case, millions of people. And, he gets up there and he's just got it all. Everything from the message, he's graduating with a master's in education. So his speech is, of course, focused on education, in particular, how to reduce inequalities in education. And then, so the message is there, the content is there, and then his delivery is just, because he's a hip hop artist, he's a performer. He's not naturally gifted. He has spent years working at being a performer, and he brings all the elements of a performance to bear in that. So I encourage people to watch that, because it is one of the most moving, inspiring 5 minutes that you will ever have. And it teaches us all what to strive for, the body language and the gestures, and bringing your audience in, and truly giving your audience an experience that they feel they can participate in. That's what great communicators do, and he's phenomenal. Yeah, and his speech was viewed millions and millions of times.
Yeah, and it is phenomenal. And I think one of the things that resonated with me about it is I have a background in theater and performed improv for 20 years, live. And that element of putting on a show, of it being a performance, I think that makes people uncomfortable when they're thinking of giving a speech. But that kind of depends on how you start to look at it and how you practice. Because when you're up there, you're trying to hold everyone's attention. So it is a show. It is a performance. So, his 5-minute speech is definitely a performance. And I think that's what connects with everyone so emotionally about that.
That's right. I mean, that same speech, same content, just delivered in kind of a traditional style without any kind of energy, I mean, would have been completely forgettable. No one would be talking about it. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I think one of the things I hear most often among public speaking coaches and folks in communications, they advise people, don't think about it as a performance. Just you're up there to give information. And I get why they say that, right? Folks are already nervous, they're already anxious, and now they think they have to perform. It becomes so unmanageable and so overwhelming. So I understand why there's an instinct to say that. But I just don't think we're doing anybody any favors, because the reality is when you are standing in front of a group of people, you have to deliver, you have to perform. You're not there to just read something that you or someone else has written. It is a human experience between you and the human beings that you're in front of. You have to have an emotional connection with them, and in people who watch Donovan's speech, you have an opportunity to create an experience. And so, rather than it be the scary thing, it's actually, I think, can be a very liberating perspective, because it's a way of, like, you're not alone up there. The audience is with you. They want to be part of what you're creating. And if you can, and throughout the book, I offer ways that you can bring your audience in so that you can have an experience with them that is memorable and informative for them, a positive experience for you, and one that you can all learn from and that inspire people. And so, again, think of all the best presentations that you've ever heard. They all do that in one way or another.
They do. And I think I love the concept, and this runs throughout the book, of letting people in and having them join you in your speech. Because if you're in front of an audience, I do think it's empowering to realize there are other human beings here and they're pulling for me, So if I look at them and I see them and I smile at them and I take my time and I breathe, they're there with me, If I'm rushing and I'm nervous and I'm anxious and I'm bearing down on myself, they're there for that too. So a lot of times you can get your energy and you can see the crowd. And all the greatest speeches that I love, at some point, the speaker acknowledges something in the crowd or notices something.
There's that actual emotional. I mean, there's science behind it. I mean, Uri Hassan at Princeton has done all that famous work about what happens between the brains of a speaker and the audience, and how they and I talk about this in the book. Neural coupling, how your brains literally sync up and you have this experience. And, I include, President Obama talked about it, what he was feeling, that connection. He called it like a current of emotion between him and his audiences. Donovan spoke about it. And, we've all experienced it, whether it's a speaker, at a musical performance, at a concert. You know it when you're having this experience. You feel like you're one with the speaker, the performer. You feel like you're one with the audience around you. Again, you don't have to be a world-class speaker to be able to create that experience, and that's what I'm trying to get folks to embrace.
Yeah, and I think you do that very effectively in the book. And I think one of the important things that you keep coming back to is that, what you have to offer is unique to you, and your voice is unique, even if you don't think it is. There's stories that you've experienced and things that have brought you to the moment where you're speaking. So using them authentically instead of overwhelming people with facts or reading, bullet points off of a PowerPoint
Right.
at people, which we all love,
Right, we've all suffered through those.
Yeah, like we all love that. So I think that the personal nature of speaking is something that comes, through your book loud and clear, and I think it's really cool. And one of the things that I think is really important about the book is it's really not for speechwriters. You were a speechwriter
Right.
professionally
That's not
for
what this book is about.
no at
Right.
all. It's not about how to write the greatest speech. It's really about how to get comfortable with public speaking. And I think you give a lot of really good tips and really help people at how to get better at what they're saying and try to communicate. So why was that so important to you?
Well, because I really, I may be a speechwriter, but very few people are ever going to write a speech. In business, politics, most of the situations we're called for. But at one time or another, we all have to get up and speak. So we're going to, give a toast at our family dinner at Thanksgiving or the holidays. We're going to give eulogies for the people we love. We're going to do toasts at anniversary parties for the people we've worked with, presentations at work of all, town hall meetings in our community. Maybe you'll speak for 2 minutes at a rally. Maybe you'll run for office yourself. Maybe you lead a company or organization or an NGO. You're trying to solicit donations or investments. I mean, we all have to be effective communicators. So, yeah, this now, if you are a speechwriter and you do have to write for a living, this book is for you as well. It's all in there. But even if you've never gonna, consider yourself a speaker per se, my hope was that this was going to basically share, here's how a president did it, here's how ordinary folks all over the country like Donovan Livingston have done it, and you can do it too. It's actually, so that was one of the reasons I include stories like Donovan and so many others, is that I realize it's to say to folks, "Oh, here's how a president did it, and you can do it too," is
Yeah, right.
a bit of a jump. Not only because the presidents by that point are pretty good, but presidents have teams of speechwriters to help them do this, and we don't. None of us have that. So that's why I bring in these other stories, because stories like Donovan, he didn't have anyone. He had to do it himself. He didn't have a professional to guide him, and he did it. And he did something phenomenal and beautiful, and that people are going to be watching and talking about for years to come. We can all do that. So yeah, the book is structured. The book is laid out like I think you can lay out a good presentation. The things you need to do at the beginning, things you can do in the middle to keep your audience engaged, the things you can do to really just wow them at the end and make them want more.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's I think it's really well structured and gives you some real actual concrete tools to work with, but it's also very motivational. And one of the things that I love about it is that, sometimes when you think about doing a speech, if you don't think you're going to be a person going and doing a speech, you might say, well, I don't need this book. But the book's called Say It Well. And I don't care if you're talking to 3 people and you're trying to persuade them to do something, like give your department funding, you're pitching a campaign,
Get your kids to take outside the garbage.
you're trying to negotiate, a different set of chores. This book, because it's about how to say it well and communicate effectively, I think has tips for literally anyone that's going to have to communicate for a living. So think about people in marketing. We're constantly trying to talk to other people about ideas. So this book is rich in that because you have to inspire an audience. Like if you're trying to talk to someone about doing a campaign, you have to pitch the campaign, which is basically storytelling and speaking well and hitting all those structural elements that you've built into the book.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one of the most important things that we need to do as communicators, again, in any walk of life, is something I think most people don't do enough, which is to think deeply about the audience and what they bring to it. So, you know, um, knowing your audience is one of the most basic fundamental principles of effective communication. We all know that, but I think truly knowing your audience means knowing, a dozen different things about them. I try to, and I lay out in the book a bunch of questions that I would encourage anybody to ask and get the answer to before you ever give any kind of presentation or speech. And because you want to know, what your audience is bringing to this. Now, because I always think of great presentations as sort of 2 circles and a Venn diagram. I even have it in the book. There's sort of, on one hand, there's a sort of, it's like, it's you, the speaker, the communicator, your values, your interests, your goals, your objectives, everything, your experiences, everything you bring to that moment. And then there's the audience and their values and interests and goals and what they're trying to achieve. And you need to know all of that, everything that they bring to it, their mood, their hopes, their dreams, their triumphs, their tragedy, everything. because what you're looking for is that space of overlap, the common ground. To me, that's where the greatest speeches and presentations lie. That's where you can really connect with your audience. And so, obviously, the more the overlap, the more opportunities you have for connection. Someone said to me once, "Well, what if there's no overlap?" And I don't agree with I don't believe that's possible. I mean, at a minimum, I mean, if you're in the United States and you're speaking, then at a minimum, you're all Americans. You share some of that, and maybe you're speaking to an international audience. Well, you're all human beings, and there are some basic things you want to provide for your family. You want to keep your children safe. You want to provide education and opportunity for your children. You want to be able to work. You want to provide for your family. You want to be able to pray the way you want to pray and live the way you want to live. These are all things that people share. Now, how they do that might be fundamentally different, but I think we need to, and I know this is one of the core tenets of marketing, right? Is how are you going to connect with this particular audience at this particular time? Which means you shouldn't be out there just giving the same presentation all the time to every group, regardless of who they are, because you're going to miss huge opportunities to really connect with them around what's important to them.
Yeah. And I think that, all the work you put into knowing an audience, whether it's a big audience or a small one, is about empathy. And to be a great marketer, to be a great speaker, to be a great speechwriter, to be a great leader takes a lot of empathy, because finding that overlap, no matter how small or how large, really takes you imagining what other people's lives are like. So I think there's a ton of trying to encourage people to be empathic in your book, and I really respect that.
Yeah, I mean, people always ask me, what are the most important skills to being an effective public speaker, communicator? I mean, there are many of them. I mean, one of them has to be empathy. If all you're doing is just getting up all the time and spouting and talking about what you want and what you believe, you're going to miss huge opportunities to connect. You shouldn't be just going around giving the same speech to everybody all the time, because you're not going to truly connect with them. So yeah, I think empathy is. I mean, obviously, we're in a time in the world where empathy. I wish it feels a little bit in short supply.
Yeah, it feels a little battered right now, doesn't it?
Yeah, and so I hope that as folks go through the book, they think about ways that, again, all the different things you should be asking about your audience. Again, what's their mood? What are their lived experiences? What have they gone through? How can I speak to that? How does my agenda, my vision align with what they're bringing to that moment? Again, if you once you accept the fact that this is any kind of presentation or experience is a coming together, so in that 10, 15, 30 minutes, whatever time you have together, it's your chance to really understand and connect with this group of people. You will have more chance of success. One of the, I think, greatest compliments you can get as a speaker, as a communicator, is when someone comes up to you after and says, thank you so much. I really felt like you were speaking to me
Yeah.
personally, and I felt like you understood me. I mean, that person, they felt heard, they felt seen, they felt understood. Whatever you said, in a way, you channeled their views, you channeled their experiences, and they felt heard through you. That is the sign of a great communicator.
Yeah, it really is.
And a great leader.
Yeah, I agree. And you spend a decent amount of time in the book, and especially at the end, talking about the importance of empathy and civility and honesty and communication. And I think it's so timely right now, and I love that there's a lot of heart that runs through this book and your work. I mean, you wrote a lot of really beautiful speeches in your career. So how important do you think it is? I think it's really easy for people to just feel discouraged about things like being civil and, and not being empathic. Have any message for our troubled world?
Yeah, we can solve everything right here.
Yeah, right, sure.
One of the things that really gets me is when, particularly in the political space, when people see other people winning who don't necessarily share your vision, your values, or your kind of approach to communication, and that, maybe they win the election, and so there's a tendency sometimes to say, well, see, we can't just keep doing this civility thing. The other side is cleaning our clock, and they're not civil at all. My answer to that is, well, wait a second. You've told me you don't you don't like that approach. You don't like that person. You don't like the way they communicate, and you don't want to raise your children that way. So now you're telling me that your answer to that is fire with fire, and to just go down that path and become the very thing you say is not helpful for our society, our pluralist democracy. So one of the challenges that I have in the book, I have a whole section called "Don't Be a Demagogue." Here are the things that we shouldn't be doing, and I don't care if somebody else is doing it. I don't even care if they're winning the election this time. Every time one of us opens our mouth, whether in our family dinner table, our community meeting, our neighborhood association, when we post online, when we advocate, in our community, in our business, every single one of us has a choice of what comes out of our mouth. We get to decide, and every single one of us has a choice to either, replicate the style of communication that we don't like, or to be the civil, honest, empathetic communicators we say we want. So, the politicians are often the worst abusers. We, the people, can choose a different way. And so, one of the things that I lay out in the book, I think a lot of us forget. We say we want to be civil. I mean, we go through these moments. Everyone agrees, oh, we need to be more civil, and then an hour later, everyone's just acting the way that they've always acted. And so, I think it's worth. I hope folks think deeply about what I'm trying to offer. Like, we all have a tendency at one time or another to dehumanize people we disagree with, or to condescend to them because they see the world a different way. We all do it, and we all have to stop it. It's tearing the country apart, and we can't just be saying, those people need to be more civil. I mean, because those people are saying those people need to be civil. They're talking about us. So I hope that people can kind of read the book and think, okay, what can I do differently in my family, in my business, online, in my community to bring more civility to our public discourse?
Yeah, man, I love that you went into that, because I think you do cover it in this book, and I think you have to set the example with your communication that you're proud of. And it has to be genuine to you. So yeah, just because ugliness works, just like in marketing, selling with fear works. Do you know what I mean? You can scare people into buying stuff. A lot of us in marketing refuse to do it. I don't care if it works. We don't do it here. We won't ever use fear to sell something. There are better ways. And I think, in discourse, there's been a coarsening of discourse, but we don't get it back by just throwing the baby out with the bathwater and having us fist fight in the streets verbally. I think I love that in your book, because I think part of saying it well is saying it civilly and speaking from your heart.
Yeah, no, I mean, I acknowledge very frankly in the book that, I mean, at times, yes, fear can work. It actually can work in good ways sometimes. I mean, from a marketing perspective, I mean, one of the ways that we as a society got people to start wearing seatbelts is showed, you know, terrible photographs of car wrecks and scared the hell out of people. We talk about, those, everyone has seen those, commercials on television with the people with the hole in their neck and talking because they smoke too much. I mean, those are fear-based uh, public awareness campaigns, and there's all sorts of examples of it working, for good. Now, there's sadly too much fear in at work for not good. And again, you're not gonna. Obviously, fear can work. You can get more clicks. You can get more views. You can get more donations at times, and you can sometimes win elections with that. But in the end, we're all responsible to ourselves and to our children and to the lives that we're going to lead. And we can either be remembered as someone who trafficked in fear and lies and dehumanization, or someone who spoke and lived their lives with civility and honesty and empathy. And that's what this book is an appeal to choose to choose the latter.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it such an important book, is that I think it helps us figure out how to communicate better with each other, whether that's in groups, small or large, and how to be authentic with our voice, but also how to be kind and be civil and try to set an example for other communicators. Because I'm far from ready to give up and just, go with, the coarsest communication I can think of. So I really appreciate that you put that in the book.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm glad it resonated. And again, like I said, it can't just be, I'm always amazed that those idiots need to learn to communicate with more civility. Like, well,
Yeah.
it works both ways sometimes. But that's not to say everyone's equal, and that there's certain, bad actors out there who do it a lot more than others. But you don't want to. You also don't want to give people who disagree with you a reason to dismiss your argument because they think you're being nasty. Force them to meet you on the merits of the argument. But it can be an uphill battle sometimes.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that helps, not, if you try to be a positive communicator and you're committed to it and you're committed to like being civil, it's good to remember that there are trends and fads. And if I've been in brand and marketing for, 30 years, and I've seen a lot of different trends come and go. And so we right now have a trend of, flaming each other and being really coarse and a little brutal in communication. And it seems to be working right now. That doesn't mean it always will. I think the pendulum will swing back the other way.
Let's hope. That's right.
Yeah, let's hope. I'm there with you. So before I let you go, what's next for you? What's going on in your life as far as going out and promoting the book? I know you'll be at a thing called Story Camp in Park City, Utah in July, but you're doing a lot right now. So what's some highlights coming up for you?
Yeah, well, the fall was all about the initial book tour and taking it on the road, and really had an awesome book. I'd never been on a book tour before. Again, as a speechwriter, kind of behind the scenes my whole life, to be the person out there in front, the one on stage, the one in front of the camera was a big change. But yeah, now it's I'm just trying to spread the message about Say It Well as far and as wide as I can. Trying to, particularly with young people, young professionals, folks who are just starting out their career, and traveling around the country and doing a lot of training, a lot of workshops, a lot of Zooms where I'm just trying to bring this to as many people as possible. And yeah, and one of the events I'll be doing is a 2-day immersive workshop called Story Camp in Park City, Utah. Folks can Google it online. It's a 2-day experience, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, you're doing some really cool stuff. I follow you, of course, on LinkedIn and on other platforms. So I just kind of feel like since our last podcast episode, I've had so much fun watching you have so much success with the book. And I'm invested, I'm like incredibly proud of you. And I think the book is amazing, And so do you think you'll write another now that you've had this experience?
The sequel.
See if we can set up a third episode.
Right. The sequel, Say It Weller. We'll see. No, I mean, this is, I don't have, writing a book is hard. It's all consuming. And so I'm not currently planning to write a book. This is a book that I felt was in me, and I wanted to do it and share it. I'm excited to be able to share it with folks. So maybe we'll do some updated, but it's coming out into, I think, 8 different languages. So I might have languages that I don't even speak. So I'm going to have to trust that they translate it well and leave it at that. But yeah, I think this is probably going to be, unless I don't know, let's check back in a year and see if there's another.
We'll touch base and see what you're into.
The last time I was on, I said maybe I'll write a book. So maybe I'll end this one with saying, hey, maybe I'll write another book.
Yeah, and we'll see, right? Because I just think that was so cool, because it was definitely at the end of our last episode something you were just starting to think of. So it was really fun for me to watch all this happen. And I'm so glad you're having so much success with it, because it is an extraordinary book. It's incredibly well written. It's motivational, and you can learn a ton from it. So we'll put a link to your book. And please, everyone, follow Terry on LinkedIn as well. We'll have that on his episode page too. And Terry, thank you so much for coming back and being on the podcast today. I had a blast talking with you.
Thanks so much, Steve. Anytime. This is a great conversation.
Yeah, man. Anytime at all. You have something you want to talk about, just shoot me a message and we'll get back on here.
All right. Sounds great.
Thanks, man.
Take care.
Want to hear more inspiring stories? Subscribe on your preferred podcast app so you don't miss an episode. And if you like what we're doing, please rate, review, and share. It's the best way to support us. Thank you for listening to Brand Story.